Hello, everyone. I am Belinda Cheeseborough, STEM Education Specialist at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I'm here to share the stories of African Americans and the impacts they've had and continue to have on American culture due to their STEM contributions. Through the Window and Into the Mirror is a career conversation series about the experiences of African American STEM professionals today. During this session, students will peer into the windows of their speakers' lives and learn from their lived experiences. They will also find parts of their culture and lifestyle mirrored in their stories. To everyone listening, it is our hope that you leave here with information, inspiration, and plans for action as you take your first steps towards having a career in STEM. Now, let's meet our speaker. Welcome, Dr. Britt Moore.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And I'm very excited to chat with you today while engaging the teachers, students, and their families who will be watching this interview. So now let's move on to our first question. So please tell us about your work, briefly tell us about your work, what you do, and anything else you think is important for us to know.
Yeah, so I am a professor of environmental protection at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. A lot of my job is teaching, so I teach introductory and advanced classes on things like soil science and also environmental justice. And a big part of my job is also research. So I'm director of the UNCW Environmental Soil Science Laboratory, where we have lots of active projects going on various topics related to soil contamination, related to soil water retention, and soil and water conservation and management.
Awesome. It sounds like you do a lot of a lot of things there, especially with the research aspect of it, which we'll touch on, and also the teaching side of it too.
Great.
So let's go back to when you were a kid, when you were just a budding
Way
Dr.
back
Moore.
in the day.
Yeah, way not that far, not that far. just a few days ago, right? So growing up, did you have an interest in STEM? What positive STEM experience did you have that inspired you to pursue your current career in STEM?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in science, especially living things. I remember being a kid, always wanting to watch the Discovery Channel or Animal Planet, and just being glued to the TV whenever there would be any kind of animal or dinosaur show on to really like learn about things like how organisms interact with each other and things about plants and animals has always really, really interested me. And I remember when I was little, growing up in Chicago, catching lightning bugs and praying mantises and trying to keep them in jars. And of course, they die a lot of the time. And I'm trying to figure out why I can't keep them alive. I've always had that curiosity about the world around me and especially about living things.
I was gonna say I resonated with the bugs part, because when I was younger, I also was fascinated with bugs and like earthworms and stuff like that, with like digging them up and kind of looking at them. And then I somehow managed to get a phobia of them. So I can no longer look at them, but I'm sure you still look at bugs all the time in
Oh,
your
yeah.
soil sample research. So
Lots of worms in the soil. So, yes.
yeah, the soil loves them and that's good for them. That's their home. But yeah. So also while growing up, did you have any big role models or influencers?
Yeah, so I would say that my biggest influencer and supporter was my mother. She was so proactive about nurturing my interest in science, and she would take me to Chicago's many museums. And I just remember that from an early age, her supporting that and us going to museums on Saturdays and just learning different things and her being just so supportive and nurturing of that.
That's really important, having your parents on your side and nurturing that curiosity in very, I guess, like, I don't want to say productive ways, but like helpful ways like
Yeah.
that, like taking trips to the museum. Like that reminds me of when I grew up with my dad. He would also take me to the museums here in DC as well as like the planetarium.
Yeah.
Um, and that fostered my interest in science, of course.
Oh,
But yeah,
yeah. And her just being patient with my questions because I was one of those kids, and I'm still one of those people to this day that asks why. Then if you tell me something, I'm like, okay, well then why? Why?
yeah,
Why? Why?
We never stop with the toddlers, the toddler questioning. Like, why? What do you mean that? How does that work like that?
Right.
Just grew up being scientists. So what other hobbies did you have? Like you mentioned that you were super into living things and learning about the living things that lived in the ground and above the ground and the little ecosystems around you. But what other hobbies or interests did you have while growing up that may not be STEM related?
I used to love video games, and I'm saying used to. I still do love video games.
Which video games did you like to play?
Oh, back in the day. Wow. This is way back in the day, y'all. I used to have a Super Nintendo and a Sega.
Ooh.
So
Oh,
reaching way back.
so it sounds like you played a little bit of Sonic here and there,
You
maybe.
already know. Yep. Had the cheat codes and everything I used to put in. Yep.
Hey, retro gaming is a thing. People still love retro games,
It's coming back.
especially yeah, especially
Okay.
retro game machines too. Come on now. People still love that stuff.
Oh, if I can get my hands on the Nintendo 64, I'll be in business.
I'm pretty sure you can. I remember playing on the Nintendo 64 and blowing the cartridges,
Oh, yeah, that's
making sure
right.
they were
Our audience is
sometimes
going to have no idea what we are talking about.
I still do
Way
that
back in the
now.
day.
Like USB, just like, oh, maybe it's not working because I just need to blow on it, just like hey, helpful troubleshooting tips
Right.
aside from turning it on and off again. But yeah, video games span across generations, so I think they'll understand. So moving on into schooling, where did you go for undergrad and what did you major in and what made you decide to pursue that major?
Yeah, so I did my undergraduate at a small public university in Missouri called Truman State University. And while I was there, I actually majored in agricultural science with a minor in biology.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what made you want to pursue that major?
Being really interested in not only living things, but also what I could do that would really be a way to help solve real world problems. So I really became interested in this idea of food and like how do we make sure that people have enough food? Well, you have to make sure that we're growing crops. So I really became interested in like the ecosystems and the science around how food plants grow. So um, I put that together with biology and created a program for myself where, yes, I was learning about plants and animals, but I was doing that in a way that helped me really learn more about food systems and how we grow food.
That's really cool. And it sounds like you kind of designed your own major in a way to kind of specifically suit what you were looking for in your goal. I know that some people think about when they go to college, like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I don't know what I want to study. And sometimes you just have to make your own path, like make your own program in a way. And if you have, like, did you have people there that were helping you like connect across like different departments to get the classes and stuff that you wanted to take?
Yeah, so it was some people that were really supportive. However, I mean, telling people that you're an ag science major, I mean, I remember just a lot of people being confused and like, oh, so you want to be a farmer? It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be a farmer, but I want to understand the science end of it. So, um, not everybody kind of understood because I was doing something that wasn't exactly common. It's like I said, well, yes, I really, really like animals and plants and ecology. And no, I'm not from a farm. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. But I'm still interested in this issue because issues about food and about hunger affect everybody, not just people that grew
Literally.
up on a farm. Right. So, to answer your question, yeah, there was some support, but not everybody kind of understood what it was that I was trying to do. But I knew what I wanted to do in the direction that I wanted to take. So I was also really fortunate to have support for friends and family, many of which said, "Hey, I don't know what you're going to do with that, but if you're sure about it, then we're going to support you."
And that's all it takes. That's all it takes. So while you were an undergrad, did you have any opportunities that helped further um, your career goals into what you're doing now? Like maybe
I
like research experiences and things like that?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate. During my first year as an undergraduate, I got a call from my former high school wrestling coach. He took a job down in Florida and said, Britt, we need some interns. Come down here for the summer. And he invited me to come down to the cypress swamps of Florida and to do an internship for National Audubon Society, doing things like invasive species management. So we would
Ooh.
be out into the swamp. It was my job to make sure that we controlled invasive plant species and invasive animal species, and to do things like controlled burns, participate in stuff like that. So it was just a great experience. And I think it speaks to the value of keeping an open mind, because I'll never forget the first day I got there. I'm a city kid, y'all, through and through. I
Mm.
grew up in Chicago. And when I first got down to South Florida, I mean, it's lizards running around everywhere, and it's bugs, and it's nature, and it's, panthers outside, and bears are down there. And I was way outside of my element, and very uncomfortable, but I pushed forward. And after 2 or 3 months, I enjoyed the experience so much that I was sad to leave.
Wow. Wow. I don't know if I could do it. That is props to you. Like the moment you said bugs, my brain was like mosquitoes. Oh, I can't.
It was rough. It was rough for a while. It was.
Just bathing yourself in citronella. Just like, oh.
Right. That's what I was doing too. That's really funny.
But no, that's really awesome. And it speaks to like just as you said, keeping an open mind and maybe the opportunities might not seem like they quite fit with what you're doing, but there's still valuable lessons that you can gain from just tapping into other sciences that are kind of tangential to what you're doing, right? So,
And it's really interesting because at first I thought it was tangential, but having been on the practitioner side of plant management and animal and ecosystem management, by the time I came back to do my classes, I was so far ahead of my peers because I had that practical knowledge. In my agricultural science class, yes, we're not doing invasive species management, but plant ecosystem interactions behave the same way, right? So
mm,
I was really able to apply that knowledge in a way that I didn't see ahead of time. And I think that speaks to the value of a well rounded STEM education, because so many aspects of STEM really do fit together with one another. So I would really encourage all of our audience to be very, very open minded when you're thinking about opportunities to engage in STEM.
that is very true. That is very true. You hit the nail on the head. So after completing your undergraduate program, did you immediately move on to grad school or did you take a break and do something else?
I took a 2 year break. So I actually moved to New Zealand and I
Oh,
stayed
wow.
there for 2 years. Yeah. So,
What prompted New Zealand? Like
well, when I was an
what's going
undergraduate,
on in
I
New Zealand?
did I did a study abroad in Australia and New Zealand when I was an undergraduate, and fell in love with the place. When I
Oh,
graduated, I wanted some time to really narrow down what I was going to do for graduate school, and I thought it was a good opportunity to live abroad. So that's what I did.
that's really cool. So how does like the I guess ecosystem of New Zealand compare to like Florida, compared to like the South Side of Chicago? Like you're experiencing different cultures, different places. So like what was it
Yes.
like there?
Very, very different. Very different. But it was such a great opportunity because I'm able to see, as far away as you can get from Chicago, literally,
Mhm.
an ecosystem and a culture that's so different. So it really did um, help me better focus on what I wanted to do for my career. Because, for instance, with my background being in agricultural science, they have a very different agricultural system. They have a very different ecosystem. And New Zealanders are some of the world's leaders on balancing the needs of agriculture and the needs of the environment. So really being able to see how different people interact with the environment, how different people interact with agriculture, how different ecosystems operate, and then pair that with my experiences from Florida and my background from Chicago, I was really able to help myself kind of narrow in on what type of practitioner and what type of scientist that I wanted to be by blending those experiences.
That's so cool. That's very enriching. I've had the opportunity to also leave the United States and go to, like, other countries, like, I've been to Lesotho, that's, like, within South Africa,
Mhm.
and just, like, seeing the land there and everything is just how completely different. Of course, like, my background is in astronomy, so, like, my, interest was looking up instead of looking down and seeing how the sky looks different now that we're in the Southern Hemisphere, and then even that's just a more enriching experience as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, just go out there and any opportunity you can take to go to other countries and experience different cultures is always necessary.
Yes.
So after your 2-year break, what made you decide, I think it's time to go to grad school now?
Well, that's such a great question. I'd always known I wanted to go to graduate school. I just wasn't sure exactly what it is that I wanted to get my master's in.
Mm,
So I knew that after that 2 years, I was going to go to graduate school. And after the experience of living in New Zealand, I became super interested um, in how plants grow and how plants interact with soil. So when I did my master's at Iowa State University, I decided to focus on root and soil interactions. So that's what I did my master's in.
okay, that's pretty cool. And so how did you transition from, like, this very focus on research and trying to understand, like, soil and the connections between the plants and the animals in those ecosystems? How did you branch from that to be like, "I wanna teach K through 12?" Like, how did
Yeah, so after I finished my master's degree, I was a high school science teacher for a while. And that is something else that I always had a passion for. So even when I was in
Mm,
graduate school, I took the opportunity to teach classes whenever I could. And it's always something I knew I wanted to do because I'm so passionate about science. Like I get so excited about science. And I love to share that passion with other people. So I think that's really played a big part in my passion for education. And I'm also a really, really big believer in the power of education to help sort of expand our horizons. So, with me having the opportunity in the classroom to share my passion of STEM, is just something that I find very fulfilling.
I 100% resonate with that. I think a lot of us in science, especially the ones who are good science communicators, have that feeling of like we love learning about all the things that we're learning about, that everyone needs to learn about these things too. And I fully resonate with that. And so my next question actually was gonna be how like what do you have any favorite memories or stories from like when you were a high school science teacher that you carry with you to this day?
I can say that job never had a dull day. So many stories, so many just great interactions with students because you spend so much time with the students and you really do start to develop relationships with them and it's an experience that really does leave an impression on you and it's very humbling because you realize that you are a role model to them.
Mhm.
You realize that they really do take to heart the things that you say, so it makes you more careful and more responsible. And you also take the opportunity to make sure you instill in them good values, good work ethic, good life skills. So I would say it was an experience that I can say definitely matured me as a person.
I was gonna ask, like, what, I guess, lessons did you learn from teaching these high school students? Like, what did they teach you in response to you
Yeah.
teaching them?
So the biggest thing that I learned from it is that science I was their science teacher, but um that wasn't the only hat that I wore. What
Mm,
they got out of being in the classroom, for many of my students, frankly, I was the first Black teacher that they'd ever had. And these are students that are, students of color. So just being a role model, being somebody that's there, that's present, that cares about them. Um, they really taught me that so much of the work that I'm engaged in around education is around the students knowing that, yes, I'm here to teach you science. Yes, science is important, but also, I'm teaching you this because I care about your growth and development and advancement.
mhm.
And I think that plays such a big role in being able to connect with people. When people know that you care about them and that you take their interest to heart, then they're in a much better position to hear anything else that you have to say, including anything else about STEM or about science.
So what you're
So,
saying is, sorry, I
oh,
didn't
no,
mean to cut
no,
you off.
please.
I was gonna say what you're saying is that if we just had a little bit of empathy, it could actually take us to many different places.
It goes a long, long way. It really does. And I think that unfortunately, in my field, in the biophysical sciences, sometimes that level of empathy is not always seen as being an important part of the conversations that we have.
Mm.
And that's something that I hope will change over time.
And it definitely needs to change because as you're studying something very important that literally impacts all of us and not just the humans. I know we care a lot about the humans, but the animals themselves need to survive too, because we also rely on their survival as well. But
Absolutely.
yeah. But also moving into the PhD portion, because you have a doctor in front of your name. So that means you
Yes.
continued on. So what made you want to continue on to get your PhD? I thought, you were happy being a high school science teacher.
I was very happy doing that job. It's a very demanding job. It's really interesting because being a professor is far easier than being a high school science teacher. It's not even a close comparison. High school science teacher is the most fulfilling and also the most difficult job I have ever had in my life. So yes, it was a fulfilling experience, but I known all the while that I wanted to get a PhD because I knew that I wanted to be in charge of my own laboratory. There were research
Mm.
questions that I was asking that other people weren't asking. And I really wanted to be in a position to be able to explore those research questions. And having a PhD and working at a university really allows you to have access to some of the tools to do just that.
That is very true. That is very true. As I tell people that getting a PhD doesn't mean that you know everything. It just gives you a tool so you can learn as much as possible and to
Absolutely.
investigate what you want to investigate. So moving on to your current career. So now you're a professor, associate professor.
Assistant
Sorry,
professor. Yep.
assistant professor. What are your like day-to-day duties as a professor? You mentioned that it's a bit easier workload than when you were working as a high school teacher. So like what are your day-to-day duties? And also jumping into the research portion, like what are some of the big questions you're trying to answer within your research?
Sure. So, in terms of the responsibilities of my job, I'm tasked with doing teaching, research, and service. So, for teaching, as I mentioned before, I teach classes, some introductory classes, some advanced classes on topics from soil science to water management to environmental justice. I also do research that follows those same subjects. And then there's also the service component. So when I do have the opportunity, then I go and speak to groups that are not affiliated with the university. So, just a few months ago, I went to speak to the Lifelong Learning Institution, and those are seniors, older adults, people that are 60 up that have a passion for learning and like to hear about certain topics. So, I went there and we did a soil science seminar, and I brought soil with me, and we did some soil chemical tests, and I showed them how to test the pH in their backyards. And we were able to engage in those hands on activities as part of my service to the community.
That's really cool. To show it's like it's not just kids that are curious, even that curiosity persists even into older age as well.
Absolutely. Oh, the seniors were so excited and thrilled to get their hands dirty and to do some chemistry on the soil. They were just so excited about it.
That's super cool. It really makes me feel like when we get older, we just start becoming kids again, basically.
Yes.
So what are some like big misconceptions that the everyday person has about soil? When I think about it, I think of it as just dirt. There's some organic matter in there from like dead animals and also, some living creatures in there. They're using it for shelter and foods. Like what's going on in our soil? What do we not understand about it?
Yeah, so the first word out of your mouth was dirt. And I think that that's the most common misperception about soil. People think that soil and dirt are the same thing, and they absolutely are not the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Dirt is the stuff that you wipe from the bottom of your shoe or, off of your shoulder. Soil is the most complex biomaterial on the planet that is capable of supporting life. It's an entirely different thing. The biggest problem that we have with the way we treat soils is that we treat soil like dirt. And that's the problem.
Mm, okay. So we need to respect the soil more.
We need to respect the soil more. Dirt is dead, soil is living, it's alive, and it's capable of supporting life.
Okay. Oh, wow. Now that's going to resonate with me for the rest of the day. I was like, wow. And every time I walk outside, I'm like, you're alive. You're not dirt. You're alive.
That's
Dirt is
right,
what I
it's
track in my
alive.
home.
It's alive, and people don't understand, I think, always how fascinating soil is. So I'll just give you, indulge me for one moment while I give you all just a few, I think, interesting and relevant soil facts. Um, First of all, there are more living things in a handful of soil than there are people on this planet.
Wow.
Fungi, bacteria, nematodes, spider, I mean, so many different organisms. The other thing is that humanity absolutely cannot exist without soils. We need soils for our survival. The other thing is, and I'm sure as a person that looks to the stars, you will appreciate this. Without hyperbole, scientists know more about the way that planets and stars move than we know about the soil beneath our own feet.
That's crazy.
Soil is such a complex material that we're constantly learning new things about it. And soil is incredibly difficult to study sometimes because it has so many living things in it, because it changes the further you go down in it, because it changes over time, because it changes across landscapes, because it can be formed in very many different ways. So, for all of these reasons, it can be difficult to study, and there's a lot of unknowns about soil.
So you're telling me just like with the oceans that we have, and there's so little that we understand that's going on in our oceans, we also barely understand the land underneath of our feet,
That's exactly right.
and we understand the heavens above even more. That's
Yes.
crazy. That's crazy. I thought we knew things already. It's 2024. How do we not know these things already?
That's what makes being a scientist so exciting, and being a soil scientist in particular so exciting. I love my job because if you are a person that is passionate about discovery, soil science is the business you need to be in, because there's so many things that are happening in such a small amount of space. and it's such a dynamic medium, and it's sensitive to the way that we treat it. So you can have, two soils next to each other, but if one of them, you have a biodiversity of plants and crops on, and the other one you don't have that on, then how those soils behave and their soil quality and soil health is going to vary significantly. So it's very responsive to the way that we treat it. It's a discipline that requires you to have an understanding of biology, chemistry, physics, ecosystems, and many other subdisciplines. So it's an interdisciplinary endeavor, and there's so much capacity for new discovery.
Wow. I'm learning so much in the short amount of time we've been talking about this. Like in my head, I'm just thinking like different types of soil just have different personalities and they're sensitive and they may not get along with other types of soil because they're built different. Like I feel like there should be like a little children's book where it's like, I'm soil from like this part of the planet.
That's going to be my next project.
Okay, yes. That would be awesome. Because like it's true, like I didn't even consider the fact that like soil varies depending on where it is on these different continents. Like I get it to some degree, like we think about like life varies, like there's um certain species of animals that are more prominent in certain zones within the earth, but like I didn't even think anything about again the soil and how diverse it is itself as well. That's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that I speak to my students about on the first day of classes, is that we all see differences in animals in different areas, but those animals depend on plant species. Plant species depend on what type of soils are in these places, and it varies significantly. So soils literally form the foundation of our ecosystems in a very literal sort of way. It's just a fascinating field of study.
So, in what ways can the average person who might be watching this interview engage with the soil around them in a meaningful way?
That is such a great question. And it's something that oh wow, it's not an easy question to answer. Of course, if you live in a rural area, there's more opportunities to dig in the soil and to explore it. But in so many of our urban areas, so many soils have been removed, so many
Mm,
soils have been damaged that there's not as many immediately available opportunities. I would encourage people as a first step to learn a little bit about soil and take a soil class if you're in a position to do so. Go visit a farm if you're in a position to do so, especially a farm that focuses on sustainable practices and a farm that takes effort to nurture their soils. If you have the opportunity to be in places like that, I think it's fantastic. Reach down, touch the soil, get your hands dirty.
okay. We gotta get our hands dirty to figure out what's going on. Or go back to our childhood roots of just being curious and investigating.
That's right.
Okay. So let's see. We moved down the list pretty fast. Um, in general, what advice do you have for mentors, educators, caretakers in supporting their mentees, students, and children who are pursuing STEM?
Oh, okay. So advice. I would encourage mentors and educators to actively listen. I think that that really meshes with that empathy piece that we talked about earlier. So not telling people what they're interested in, but listening to what they're interested in. I think that that goes a long way and can make a really, really big difference. I would also encourage mentors and educators and caretakers to encourage students to be well-rounded. Encourage them to seek out new opportunities. Encourage them to seek out new experiences.
That is very true because that's how you discover things about yourself and also further your interest in things as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. So going back to life outside the career, So you said your mom was a big influence for you growing up, and she really helped instill that curiosity and fostered that curiosity in science for you. But as you're an adult now, do you have any new role models or new influences?
I do, yeah. So I am influenced by people that are just doing amazing work and people that spend a lot of time making science accessible to other people. So, shout out to Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think he does such a good job of making science accessible and interesting for literally millions of people. But also closer to home, I want to send a shout out to Dr. Stan Howard, who runs the Law and Civics Reading and Writing Institute in Chicago, Illinois. It's a nonprofit, and Dr. Howard and his wife, Mrs. Howard, do so much work at the grassroots and community level in my hometown of Chicago for providing students of color, particularly Black students, the opportunity to learn about STEM and to engage in opportunities to get their hands dirty. So I manage soil workshops on behalf of the Law and Civics Institute, where we bring out folks and we show them how to get their hands dirty and show them why soil is important, show folks how to start a garden if they wish to do so. And that's made possible because Dr. and Mrs. Howard really have this drive to help our community, and I find it inspiring.
Exactly. No, that's a really cool. That sounds like a really cool program that they started up and that they're maintaining. How long have they been doing this program?
For just over 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Imagine the number of lives that they've impacted during that time.
It's really interesting because I did a workshop several years ago, and I was back in Chicago recently. And in the neighborhood, I heard somebody, yell out, "Hey, hey, soil, soil." The person had one of my workshops, couldn't remember my name, couldn't remember anything about me, but what they remembered is soil. They said, "It's not dirt, it's soil." And he was so excited. It was years and years after this workshop. Couldn't remember anything about me, but what he did remember was the only thing I wanted them to remember is the fact that soil and dirt are not the same. So we've been able to reach people where they are and lay some of the foundation for folks to be able to use their soils to be able to address issues of food autonomy and food scarcity and food deserts in our communities. So yeah, we're making impact.
That is so cool. And speaking of which, maybe for people who are watching this more local to your area, what are some programs within your research center that people can be involved in? Maybe some high schoolers who might be interested in taking up some opportunities to learn more about agricultural sciences as well as like soil investigation, soil science.
Yeah, so there are not too many opportunities in the region outside of visiting some of our local farms. So my background is in agricultural science, but our university actually doesn't have an agricultural science program. We do
Interesting.
have environmental science. So that's the department I'm in. And of course, I encourage people to, especially those that are in the Southeast North Carolina region where I am, to sign up for a class. Come down here, and I'd be happy to teach you something about soils. Engage with online classes whenever you're able to. Visit farms if you're able to do so. As far as high school students, I have done some high school visits from time to time. So on average, I do one maybe every 3 or 4 months. And I love the opportunity to talk with students and let them know about some of the work that we have going on in our lab. And at least 3 times a year, students come and visit. I give them a tour of our environmental soil science lab and talk to them about things like what a soil scientist does and what a researcher does. So, if any of our students have the opportunity to engage in any visits or anything like that, then I would highly encourage them to do so.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
awesome. And back to your life outside your career. So you briefly mentioned, and I was gonna bring touch on this, but we started talking about how amazing soil is, and so I got completely distracted. Um, but you mentioned something about high school wrestling. Were you doing wrestling in high school?
I did, yeah, that was my extracurricular in high school. Yes, I was a wrestler.
Okay, do you do any wrestling now?
No, absolutely not. None since high school.
What about any, like, particular hobbies that you might have done as a child or some new hobbies that you gained as you entered adulthood?
So I still love video games, right? Like I got my Nintendo Switch and my PS5. So I still love video games. And I've also developed in adulthood a passion for photography. So
Ooh.
I love to travel to new places and really capture the essence of those places when possible through photography. My home is adorned with photos that I've taken myself that I've, kind of edited and yeah, I really enjoy it.
That's really cool. What about, like, micro is it micro photography? I don't know, I'm putting 2 things
Yeah, so
together.
photography of like microorganisms, that
Yeah.
is a thing. That's not something that I have done, but it's something that I'm interested in. So that's
Mm.
probably something that I'm going to yeah, kind of dip
Dip your
into the
toes in,
waters of that.
yeah.
Yeah, dip my toes into the water and check that out. Yeah,
That would be
actually, it's
really
funny
cool.
because I have a student that was working on that this summer. One of the students that works in my lab, and just last week showed me some amazing micro photos of some fungi, and I'm like, "Wow, you took these?" And they were just captivating. It looked like photos from an alien world. So yeah, I'm interested in it, but I have not pursued it yet.
Will be exciting to see once you manage to get your toes dipped in to see what products come out of that and some really cool photos that come out of that.
Yes.
So now moving on to our last couple questions. Oh, I can't believe it's already the end. Um, what does Black/African American representation in STEM mean to you?
Wow. Um, Such a profound question. Black representation in STEM means following in the tradition of our ancestors. Our ancestors were the world's first scientists and engineers,
Mm.
right? Science ain't new for Black folk.
Oh, no.
We've been doing it since the dawn of humanity. Um, STEM representation is following in that tradition.
That's beautiful. We were the first, to look up at the stars and wonder, like, why they move the way they do. Why do plants have a cycle? All of these different things.
Absolutely.
And my last question is, what advice do you have for members of our audience, particularly the middle schoolers and high schoolers, who may want to follow a similar path as you?
Yeah, that's wow, another profound question. Probably the best thing that I could say is kind of harkens back to what we spoke about earlier. Challenge yourself to learn about things that you don't know much about. You may find yourself very surprised that something that you thought you weren't interested in or thought you knew about already is something that actually sparks an interest in you that changes your life for the better. So don't be afraid to challenge yourself to learn about new things and to take the opportunity to engage in new experiences.
That is very true. That is very true. Well, thank you, Dr. Moore, for sharing your time and story with us. To everyone watching, thank you for spending your time with the National Museum of African American History and Cultures Through the Window and Into the Mirror, a career conversation series. Before you go, please remember history is made by doing ordinary tasks extraordinarily well over long periods of time. Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.